What does it really take to amplify your exposure? We live in a world that is getting hammered with content every day, and it can feel super overwhelming to gain exposure and make your voice heard. I get it. I've been there. But Bonnie Bruderer of Binge Networks, she makes it easy by breaking it down into practical and tangible advice. In this episode with Bonnie, you're going to learn strategies to bring your message to the masses, tips on how to stand out, the importance of repurposing your content, and how you can get your message exposed on smart TVs all over the world. Bonnie Bruderer is a film and TV producer with over 700 television segments, and she's the writer, director, producer of the documentary Influencer on the social media generation and the advertising industry. With a strong background in technology and media, Bonnie started her career at companies like CitySearch, NBC Internet, Active Networks, and learned hands first how to build and sell emerging media. She's worked for 2 decades touring with some of the world's top personal development gurus, including Tony Robbins, Harvey Mackay, and many others. Bonnie founded Binge Networks, which is a multi-channel media network for creators and brands with syndication on 50 top OTT television networks. Now, before we go any further, I want to give a loving shout out to our sponsors, the Mayfair Hotel and Eve American Bistro in downtown LA, which is the home of my 3-day event, Amplified Soul Live. It takes place February 22nd to the 24th in 2019. This event is guaranteed to help you amplify your presence, influence, and impact. For event tickets and info, please head to www.rubyfremont.com/ASL. Finally, whether you're new to this podcast or a loyal thought leader, please make sure you take a moment to drop a rating and review on iTunes. I will love you forever if you do this. Now, on to the episode with the queen of exposure herself, Bonnie Bruderer. Welcome to today's Thought Leader, where I'm challenging you to rise up, speak up, and create a movement. I'm your host, Ruby Fremont, and I'm here as a catalyst for you, the new generation of thought leaders. Join me every week as I dive into raw and real conversations that will help you amplify your presence, influence, and impact. Hey, thought leaders, I am here with Bonnie Bruderer, and we connected at the New Media Summit, and I absolutely fucking love everything that she does because she is all about exposure. I have now dubbed her the Queen of Exposure. I'm not sure if, Bonnie, you're okay with that name, but that is my new nickname for you.
Love it. Love it.
So welcome to today's Thought Leader. I'm super excited to dive in and just have a solid chat about exposure and like why it's important today.
Absolutely. I mean, exposure is everything. So thank you for that great title. I will own that and gladly wear it as a tiara. I just feel that exposure is everything. We all put so much effort, so much energy, so much preparation into everything we do, be it a podcast or a video show or even just Facebook Live these days. And so if you're not getting it out and getting it out in front of the eyeballs that matter, you're really doing yourself and also your audience a disservice, because there's so many ways these days that you can get your message repurposed and get it amplified and out into the masses. And so really exposure is everything.
Yeah. And it's really interesting because I feel like we're now living in an era where it's literally at the touch of our hands, right? It's just pressing a button, hitting record, and it's all of a sudden out there in the world. And yet there are so many people holding back. Fear of, and I'm going to speak from my experience. What held me back at the beginning was fear of not getting it perfect.
Yes.
Having it so accessible almost creates more fear around gaining more exposure, because what then? It's like exposure comes with such a responsibility, it feels like.
It does. I mean, yes and no, right? Because we're putting things out there anyway, right? So I feel like a lot of times people think, well, unless it's my podcast that happens once a week, or unless it's a professionally produced, edited video, it doesn't really count. Or, and then they do Facebook every day, or they do something else. But really every single piece of content and every message that we do, we're putting out there. And so in my opinion, it's so much better to do less and do it in a really great production value or really strong value added content and get it as many places as possible than it is to constantly just be out there, out there, out there. And so when you learn how to do it properly, again, it really can magnify every single thing that you're doing and get it in front of, it just expands your reach. It gets you in front of so many more eyeballs that really want to see what you're up to in earballs.
Right. So what you're speaking to is really like value versus quantity. Like is the value of what you're offering via video or audio, is that really of value to those who are listening versus like, I'm just going to do a video every day and talk about whatever.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we used to do that. And when I was a cable talk show host. And so we produced 6 shows at a time, and we were just pumping out content, pumping it out. And I'm like, wait a minute, is this really the right strategy? Like, would it be better to do less and just have it completely valuable than to try to stretch ourselves to just get out in front of, people every single day? And by doing that, you really build more of a relationship and more of a rapport with your audience, and they really start to respect you as that person that knows what you're talking about. Just like you said, the queen of exposure. Well, until I really nichified and I really just thought, you know what, I'm going to talk about exposure. And if I talk less than I talked about everything else, that's okay, because I do know that. And that's what I want to be known for. So that's what I encourage people to do.
Yeah. And that's such an important message, because I think with social media and making everything so easy for us to gain access to, it can often, people fall into the trap of FOMO, like fear of missing out. If I'm not doing a video today, I'm going to become irrelevant.
Yes.
And that's like an actual fear that a lot of people have. And I know a lot of my listeners have. If I don't post today, I'm going to be irrelevant, because everyone is kind of shouting and trying to get their voices heard online and in media. So what you're speaking to is like really just offer quality content, which I love. But I'm wondering, how would you speak to the idea that like everyone's really just out there yelling on top of each other and trying to make their voice heard? Like, how then do we really stand out? If it's value, what else? What else do people need to know?
Know where your audience is. And that's such a great point. And I couldn't have said it better. People are yelling. They're out there. When I turn on my Facebook, it's just like, oh my God, people are in their car, they're this, they're that. It's just feed after feed after feed and I get paralyzed. Like, I don't know who to listen to. And what I realize is that there's so many markets, there's so many other places that maybe aren't cluttered and that aren't noisy, and that you can access many, many people that are interested in what you have to say. I mean, that's how we built our whole platform, and our whole business was really circumventing what's going on today. And when I say today, we started our company about 4 years ago. So back then, everything was Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. And it was just so noisy. So I just felt like, why even bother? Because I can't compete with this. And so we found sort of a backdoor to millions and millions of people that you don't have to yell. You can just eloquently express your message and get what you need to across and find people that are looking for it. So whatever you're doing, whether you're using smart TV, which is what our main point is, or whether you are using social media, just make sure that you know how to get into the right ears and eyes, because otherwise it does just kind of get swiped to the wayside, because there's just so much competition these days.
Yeah. So really speak directly to your audience, and that really starts with knowing who they are.
Exactly. Exactly.
Oh, yeah. No, go ahead. I feel like you're about to say something important.
I'm on the edge of my chair. Well, no, so you and I met at New Media Summit, and there's literally hundreds of people. There were 200 people there, many of which have their own show. Mm-hmm. And, there's 40 people that were icons, of which you were one of them. But I felt like an immediate connection to you, because I felt like our messages were so aligned. So I didn't know you before then. I hadn't heard what you were doing. The second I just sort of saw you energetically and visually, of course, I felt connected. But then once I learned, there was such a direct comparison to what we were doing in different ways. And so that's how I really equate media and attention, is really just be authentic, put it out there, and then you're going to connect with the right people. You're going to energetically sort of draw and attract the people to joint venture with, or to create collaborations with, or to view your content, as audience. So that's really important.
I'm glad that you reiterated that, because again, it can be so easy to fall into that trap of I have to speak louder or I have to
Yeah.
do more, when really it's about like, okay, how can I offer more value and how can I speak more directly to who it is that I know to be true for my audience.
Yes.
So that's really important. I'd love to talk more about Binge and uh, OTT. So OTT was so new to me because I was just like, I don't know what this term is. What does that even mean? And when you shared up on stage at the New Media Summit, my mind was fucking blown because I had never even considered that this was an option, nor this was a thing.
Interesting. Yeah, it's funny. And I hear that a lot. And it still blows my mind because I've been in it for many, many years. I've actually been
Right.
in that world for 10 years, believe it or
Yeah.
not. But simply what it means, we're all using it, but just nobody knows what it's called. So I'm going to break it all down for you guys. We're going to dispel any myths, any confusion. OTT means over the top, and it simply means consuming video content without paying for a cable bill. So when we watch Hulu.com, when we watch to some extent videos on YouTube, more YouTube red, but when you're watching Netflix, you're OTT, you're watching content where you're not paying for a cable service, you're accessing it another way. So it's also, Apple TV, Roku, those are the two, and even Amazon Fire, those are the three most popular forms of OTT. I guess you would call, those are a hardware, it's set-top box. But you also hear it referred to as smart television. So if you have really any television, an LG, a Sony, a Samsung, and that you turn it on and there's an app store and then you can access pretty much any channel that you've ever wanted to see, that is OTT or smart television.
Okay. Interesting. So we're all doing this. We just didn't know what the name was.
Exactly. Exactly.
And the part about this that blew my mind is that we can be there. Like we can be on there.
Yes.
And that didn't ever seem like a possibility. So I'd love to hear more about, because the way that I see you and how you created Binge Networks is, this is true thought leadership to me. It's like seeing an opportunity, seeing an opening, and then taking it and running with it and creating something that is so disruptive and so different, yet is also paving the way to help amplify other people's messages, which I think is amazing because I know you, Binge Networks does a lot of work with like coaches and purpose-driven people. And so it's incredible. So tell us more about what that was like when you saw that opportunity and how you seized it.
Yeah, so it's so fascinating. Many years ago, I'm such a believer in that every little piece of the puzzle along the way is necessary. And so if you kind of looked, my family, if you ask them, they would be like, she's all over the road. She's doing this, she's doing that. She works for Tony Robbins. She's a coach. She's doing these contracting jobs. And then all of a sudden, about 5 years ago, every single piece of the puzzle was there. And I was like, nailed it. So what happened for me is many years ago, I did a contract job for a set-top box company, an OTT company, and it failed because it wasn't my fault, but it failed because it was too early on. It was right in the beginning days of Apple TV, and Apple had sort of its first flop with that. But I learned a lot, and I learned about this industry that they kept saying millions and millions and millions of people were going to be watching. So kind of put that in the back, filed it away, ended up moving to New York City about 5.5 years ago and starting a cable talk show because that was always my dream. I spent 20 years in the personal development world. I worked for Tony Robbins, for Harvey McKay, and I always wanted to be sort of like the next generation of Oprah and to interview different thought leaders and to have a platform to tell their stories. And so that's what I did. And I had a cable show on the Lifestyle Channel on MNN Network every Monday night at 8 o'clock. And it was super great and exciting. And we filmed 6 shows a week and it was just, exciting in the limelight. And I just started to feel like, hey, I know we're reaching 2.5 million homes, but is anyone actually watching this show? Because I'm not getting a lot of feedback. I'm not getting bombarded in subways. Like, I don't know. And at the time, we had about 20 interns and various producers that worked on the show. They happened to be all women because we're a female-focused, mainly female-run company. And they would turn on their Snapchat. Everyone found the makeup artist that would do my hair and makeup every day. She would turn on her Snapchat and literally get hundreds of thousands of views. And I'm like, what? And so it was frustrating because, you know, again, I was trying to get the show picked up by NBC or ABC or something like that. I thought that was the goal. And so I started to go overseas. At this point, we produced hundreds of episodes, and I started to go overseas to the foreign markets and to sell the shows to different international markets. And so we picked up a number of distribution contracts. And this one time, about 3 years ago, I remember I was at this event called MIPCOM in Cannes, France. And I was hearing the head of Disney, ABC, Fox, CBS speak. And they just said, listen, the cable industry is dying. We all can agree on that. No one knows where it's heading, but we feel it's heading towards what's called smart television and OTT. And I was like, okay, well, I'm a small enough company. You know, we've now produced probably at that time, maybe 500 shows. We had 9 spin-off television series from my initial top show that we produced. And I said, I can pivot because I agree with what they're saying. And I'm not a big company. So it's not going to take me years and years and years to sort of course correct. So it was one of those where you have like a speaking engagement in the Bahamas and you have 30 hours on planes. And I literally just stayed up the whole time and remapped out my entire business plan. I went home and we continued to do my shows, and we were doing what's called branded content. And we would get, you know, like a makeup company to sponsor our makeup show. And then I realized at that point, 700 people had come on our shows. And I started to realize 2 things. Everybody wanted distribution and everyone wanted their own show. So I was like, okay, I've been doing this long enough that I know how to give that to people. And technically, all I need to do is find a way to create our own network. And then the network can do the same process I use for my own show, which was we film a show, we use my distribution contracts that I gone out and get and broadcast it on 50 different media platforms. So we spent the next year building out our own network, our own media platform, which is at bingenetworks.tv, where any content creator, a podcaster, a video creator, a movie, a TV series can have a channel. And then when you upload any content to your channel, it broadcasts immediately on 50 different media outlets.
Wow.
So yeah, so that was the journey. And, you know, there was a lot of sleepless nights, a lot of like wanting to throw up because I didn't know how I was going to fund it all. It's all been self-funded. We now have about 250 shows on our network with about 4,000 pieces of video content with distribution globally on 50 platforms. So it's been a journey.
Yeah, I mean, I would say it's been a pivot that's paid off.
It has. Oh my gosh, it is. And I think that's to your direct question, how did it happen? You have to be open enough to realizing, like, if you're just, you know, that bull and you're going towards that target, but the target is going to be disaster, you have to be open enough as an entrepreneur to say, you know what, scrap it all. Like, I think there's something else here, and, you know, and be able to redesign and figure out what solution can we create that's going to lead us in that direction.
Yeah. And that is super scary, right? To take action on. First of all, it takes a lot of courage to say, wow, I see this opportunity. This would mean that I would have to pivot everything and change everything, but I'm going to do it because I know this is an opportunity that I can't say no to. So I love that you found that opportunity and then created what you created with Binge Networks. And I know that, I mean, what's interesting about you is you have so much experience in front and behind the scenes. Like, you've been in front of the camera. You also have all this experience behind the scenes. So I only imagine that has all really benefited the way in which you've chosen to create Binge Networks and the way in which Binge Networks serves people. Could you speak a bit to that?
Yes, it really does. And I think that I'm such a believer in you have to know how to do all roles. And in the beginning, when we were smaller, I had to do everything. I was the executive producer of the talk show. So I would be doing the show and I would be sitting with a guest, meanwhile managing a studio of 10 to 20 producers that are running around, you know, and I'm like, that person's on their phone, you know, like you have to see everything. But that perspective gives you exactly what you need. It's very stressful, but it gives you exactly what you need to be able to create the other. And, you know, I still do, we don't produce our shows anymore, but I am a film producer and we have a film coming out in July of 2019. And I just was in New York filming that. And it's so funny because I happened to be on camera for this one particular filming. And it's like, same thing. I know exactly every person's role and what they're doing because I've done it all. And it's really interesting because when we filmed, it's a documentary film. And when we filmed it, people, the first time I sat down with an editor, they said, for a film this long, you need about 100 hours of interviews. I'm like, well, we've got 36. And they're like, that's not possible. I'm like, yes, it is. Because I didn't waste one word. Like we literally almost took every single word that people said and spliced it into the documentary. And I'm like, that's ridiculous. Why would you do anything why would you spend, 10 times the resources you have? And that's how I've created my business. And I always bring that back to content because I believe that like you can do it the same way. You don't need to like film and do a 3-hour podcast and then edit it into the 50 minutes of no. You know your stuff. So like figure out how do you be the best, how do you bring the best value and the most action jam-packed, precise content you can in there. And again, it all comes from having to have done every single role and know what it takes to make that happen.
That's really powerful. And I think a lot of the people who are listening who are entrepreneurs get this because often we put ourselves in that position of wearing every single hat and learning every single role. So, and talk to us more about, so say, I do a lot of video, know this, and I have my podcast, which I actually record video and audio so that I can repurpose onto YouTube. So now I've got the audio going out on iTunes and Spotify and Google Play and Stitcher, and I've got the video that goes out to YouTube. And you mentioned repurposing so much, and there is so much value in repurposing. For me, the way I look at it is my sanity is saved when I repurpose content because I'm not creating as much. So could you tell our listeners a little bit more about the value of repurposing and then how that comes into play with Binge?
Yeah. So, you can take one video. So let's just take this example for you guys. So you have something concrete that everyone can work with. So as you said, you're doing audio and you're doing video. Mm-hmm. Well, I can tell you probably 5 other things that you could do with this particular interview that we're seeing right here. And this goes for everybody listening, whatever type of content you're creating. So number 1, you could take this and you could edit it into 5-minute little teaser pieces, and you could put those every week on Facebook leading up to this interview with some jam-packed value, nugget of something. Hey, for this whole interview, tune in on December, XYZ to get the whole interview. Mm-hmm. You also could take this and you could have somebody slice it into 10-second segments. You'd probably get hundreds of those, and put your logo on it, and then use that on your Instagram. And you can use that on Instagram for months. That could be your strategy, that you're just doing, you're just doing content from that one particular show. Same thing for Twitter. Like on your Instagram, when you post, you can also send that to Facebook and to Twitter so that you're constantly repurposing. You also could take, again, a 5-minute clip from this and bullet point 5 key things that we instructed you to do to repurpose. And then that becomes an article on LinkedIn and on places like Thrive Global and on Medium. Mm-hmm. So again, you can take one thing and you can repurpose it so many different ways, but you didn't have to create something new. Like we didn't have to get our hair all nice and our makeup and the lighting right. We just had to do it once. So we didn't have to do it 10 times. And that's really what's so important. Is that, again, like I said in the very beginning of this interview, you are putting so much into what you're doing that you want to make sure it's getting as many places as possible.
That is such a good reminder, both for the listeners, but also for me. So thank you.
You're welcome.
But it's true, because we do put in so much energy and time. Time, I think, is our biggest commodity into doing these things. And so if we could slam out like 5 things out of one video, then why not? Why not just put in that effort rather than like, okay, now I've got to do another video and I've got to do another one. It's just the smart way, I think, to get your name out there and build exposure and amplify your presence.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And so Binge helps people do that in a different way, right? Like I have access to YouTube, I have access to Facebook Live, I have access to, Twitter and IG and all those things. But the idea of getting your videos, like even for our listeners, your videos or your podcasts, your audios onto someone's TV in their home, onto someone's smart TV in their home, that is fucking life-changing. My mind was blown when I heard that. I was like, wow, what? This is actually a possibility. So tell us more about what that looks like.
Absolutely. So with Binge, when you have a channel on Binge, that channel is really used as sort of the receptacle to get all of your video content in one place. So just like you do, just like you do just like you would do on your YouTube channel, you can upload all of your videos. But what's so different about Binge is that Binge then takes that video and broadcasts it on 50 different platforms. And the reason these platforms are so important is that, again, if you're hearing about this today for the very first time, or maybe you've been hearing about it, time and time again, is that these platforms have tens of millions and in some cases hundreds of millions of subscribers that are looking for content like yours.
Okay. Can you repeat that?
Yeah.
Just the numbers?
They have tens of millions and in some cases hundreds of millions of subscribers. So let me give you a couple.
That sink in, people. That's a lot of new subscribers coming your way.
It is. So, no, let me give you some concrete numbers so you can actually like wrap your brain around it. Because when people throw out random, they're like, wait, but what? So
let's make it real.
let's bring it down to what we all know. Apple, 24 million subscribers on Apple TV. Okay. Roku is right about the same. They have a few 100,000, like maybe 27 million more, but, or 27 million. We have a partner in China called Kachang Media. They have 100 million subscribers. And you might think like, well, why does that matter to me? I've never heard of it. Hello, 100 million people. Like they've never heard of you either because you're not there, but they're there and they're looking for this content. And research shows that, we've all been super focused on social media and it's here. It's not going away. I'm not going to argue that. I'm not crazy. I don't think that there's no one on Facebook anymore. It's not that. It's just that they're showing that lean back. So social media is lean forward. You're on your mobile phone mostly, or you're at your desk and you're leaning forward, you're engaging. What smart TV is what's called lean back. So you're in your home, you're at night, you're flipping through channels, old school way, I guess we want to call it, but with smart television. And that is really the current trend. Research is showing that this is where people are consuming media. So if you imagine you now have a show on Apple TV, on Roku TV, on Kachang Media, on 48, I'm bad at math, but other places that we're putting your content, that's really important and that matters to you.
Yeah, that you just gave like 1,000 different reasons to do this. And for those who are already creating video and audio content, super easy. Because basically we're just repurposing onto Binge and then Binge sends it out everywhere.
Absolutely. It's as easy as uploading a video to Facebook. Like you literally just set up your username and password once you have a channel. You click upload, put in a little bit of information, boom, you're done. And then our team does the rest. Our software encodes it, we place it onto your channel, and then the next day you can go on Apple TV or Roku or Sony and see your actual content.
Wow. Okay. So thought leaders listening, you're going to head to rubyfremon.com/binge and sign up, because this is something that if you're looking to amplify your audience, grow your audience, expand your audience, and tap into demographics you have yet to tap into, this is super powerful. I mean, Bonnie, for me, what I've noticed is like now, since Instagram and Facebook are pretty much the same thing, it's always the same audience. We're constantly talking to the same audience. My Twitter audience is a little different for sure. My YouTube audience is different for sure. And each of those audiences on its own has helped me build my business. But this is such a game changer too, because this again is just another audience to tap into. And for people like me who really want to bring their message to the masses, I mean, why not?
Yes.
Why not?
Why not? Yeah, you're already doing it. I mean, the hard part's done, right? You've got your outfit, your earrings, your hair, your makeup, and you delivered value-packed content. Why shouldn't hundreds of millions of people be seeing it?
Yeah, exactly. Why? Well said. Why shouldn't hundreds of millions of people see your content? Especially when Bonnie's made it super easy for us to do.
Yes.
Wow. Wow. Thank you so much, Bonnie. Again, listeners, I'm going to have the link in the show notes so you can go sign up and also learn more about Binge. But Bonnie, thank you so much for providing your insights as the queen of exposure, for
Thank
providing
you.
your insights on really what it takes to build that exposure and how to do it from a place of, quality versus quantity, and offering value, because that is so important in a world that is being hammered with content. It is so important to provide valuable content versus just more noise.
Yes.
So
Thank you. No, it's my pleasure. Thank you, everybody, for being here today. It's so nice to meet everyone. And it's so great, as I said, to connect with a kindred spirit.
Thank you. To our listeners, I just want to say thank you so much for joining us on today's Thought Leader, where I'm challenging you to rise up, speak up, and create a movement. If you enjoyed this episode with me and Bonnie, which I'm sure you did because it was really good, be sure to drop a rating and a review on iTunes. And Bonnie, why don't you tell our listeners how they can stalk you and Binge online?
Absolutely. So come on over to bingenetworks.tv. You can watch literally thousands of shows. And then on the very bottom of the page is my email. You can call our 800 number and ask for me, or just reach out on any of our social platforms. They're all listed on the site there. So bingenetworks.tv.
Cool. And I will include that in the show notes as well. Bonnie, thank you so much. This episode was sponsored by Mayfair Hotel and Eve American Bistro. I will see you all back here next week for a brand new episode of today's Thought Leader.